Welcome to The Pause with Ellen, Wyoming, DeLoy. Life can be demanding, and most of us get caught up in the busy go, go, go. But there is great value in taking a moment to pause and reflect. Constant momentum does not always equate to forward momentum. And I'm here to teach you how to take a strategic pause so that your next step is purposeful and in the direction of your goals. Develop self-awareness and skills that improve your ability to walk through life with intention. This is the path toward a more balanced, fulfilling state of being. Take a beat and then take action. The Pause with me, Ellen, Wyoming, DeLoy, starts right now.
Hi, good morning. You didn't catch it, but I was doing a little dance break with the intro because I have hit the ground running at 100 miles per hour before 9 and before my coffee is even done. And that is a great reason to pop in on this show today with my friend, Dr. Tia Henderson-Ho, PhD. She likes me to make sure that we know it's a PhD and not a medical degree, because some people will walk around being Dr. So-and-so, but then you're like, doctor of what? So Dr. Tia, PhD. But this show is called The Pause, and this show is called The Pause because it's about taking a break, especially in a moment like I'm having right now, where everything is going 1,000 miles per hour. I don't have time to take a breath. And I think it's always funny when I'm living my truth so completely in this moment. And Tia, I'm going to introduce you very momentarily, but I have to wax poetic for a minute here. So we're in mid-September. I homeschool my kids. I'm in the middle of getting their stuff started. I'm already a little bit late, as we can tell. However, some of the programming that I do have my kids in has been delayed a couple of weeks, which has given me a bit of a buffer because everyone's being really careful. And I'm like, great, I can be slow at home. And then instead of finishing that up over the weekend, I spontaneously decided to take them camping, which meant I couldn't get anything done, but it was really great. And the weather is still good. So I was seizing the moment, although now I have arrived here and I'm running a workshop tomorrow. And I have 8 clients to see between today and tomorrow. And I have to invoice things from 2 weeks ago and I'm just like, oh my God, everything is so crunched. So we're going to stress less with Dr. Tia Henderson-Ho, and that's my introduction to her. Tia, can you give us the 1-minute summary of who you are before we dive in on today's episode?
Sure. I love all the things that you're sharing this morning, Ellen. So students often call me Dr. Tia, and I work with growth-focused professionals to help them understand their own capacity for support while they're in those growth processes. Basically, everyone's on a growth pathway, and I work with people who are really focused on being intentional about that. Do you want me to say more about my background or?
Yeah, tell me. So that's awesome. So I'm hearing you're an instructor and a professor. I already know this, but the world doesn't know this. So Tia does a lot of things and she wears a lot of hats, and she uses she, her pronouns. But can you give us the 1 minute, we're clicking on your website, 1 minute bio?
Yeah. So my bio doesn't have any of my credentials in it. So
you don't need credentials.
So I am a trauma survivor, and have had a history of being both an environmental educator and a community health analyst. And I merged a lot of different skill sets to help support my brain body system in managing a generalized anxiety disorder, which is why I opened the business Finding Mindful Now. And through different courses that I have, I work with growth focused professionals to help them basically stabilize and understand how their systems function so that they can have more clarity and focus, very similar to some of the work that you do.
Awesome. This is why I really loved, and I'll let people know, I love talking with Tia so much because where I feel that we're on these two ends, not even at the very far ends from one another, because we're so similar in so many of the ways that we work. But if you need data science, neuroscience, research, evidence-based criteria to back the findings for why you're feeling better, Dr. Tia is the person to go to because she's got it. I operate on an intuitive basis. And so if I test it out, practice it, experience it, feel it, I'm very practical and experiential in my approach. And I like to bring in really fun frameworks like chakras and auras and bioenergetics and spirituality. You can work with me, but fundamentally, whenever Tia and I hang out, they both work in different ways. And Tia has actually coached me through some pretty intense moments of like emotional duress in my life. She's sort of the only person I would call to have support me through that. So it's really wonderful. Tia, one of the things that I was really interested as we were preparing for this was reading about, and I know that you refer to work from, I'm trying to think of her name, there's a doctor that you reference for some of her work on neuroscience. What's her name?
Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett, and the theory of how emotions are constructed.
Yes.
So it's a huge paradigm shift, and it has been in the knowledge base among neuroscientists for a while, but it hasn't caught up with how, anatomy and physiology professors teach how the brain functions, or how psychology courses teach about how the brain functions, where most of those courses are still operating on an old paradigm.
And that paradigm shift is what I was really, really fascinated by, because I know you've told this to me like a number of times in our walking and meditating kind of conversations. But the part where, and what hit me today as I was kind of re-reviewing notes this morning, was where people talk about the word being triggered comes from and what is actually within our control. Because the way I see it is when someone says, I'm going to be triggered by this, they're giving their power to the external condition, and that they don't have power to control their physical body response to it. And I'm going to guess that in some cases where this is extreme, like perhaps they're suffering from like post-war traumatic PTSD, that those are very difficult to get kind of a wrangle on. But for what you've experienced, kind of more within the realm of like your diagnosis or just your experience, what does being triggered now mean to you, and the supports that we can build for ourselves to be resilient and not have that power taken from us for our own safety, security, and well-being?
Well, for me, and I just want to say thank you for, it's always an honor to work with you and just to be your friend. So I appreciate that earlier statement that you made. So I just want to acknowledge that. I appreciate you. And in answer to your question, the word triggered to me now means that somewhere along in history, in the development of my life, this brain has formed a belief over probably a whole bunch of different little incidents of things. And that belief is some sort of lack or limitation or lack of safety. Even if that safety is not physical, it can just be the self feels at risk, the identity. And that the brain then fires this series of different thoughts, and then the body responds to those series of different thoughts, and then you've got a stress reaction. So that's what a trigger is in my experience over here.
Thank you. And we've got a couple minutes right before the break coming up. And so I want to cue listeners up for some of the things we're going to talk about in the latter half of the show. You have a new program that you've created, I think both as an e-course and a workshop. Is that right?
Yeah.
And it's about stress less with sensory awareness. And I think a part of it is what you walked me through in a session a couple of weeks ago, like elements of that practice. As I was it doesn't matter what I was going through. I was waffling through a lot of stuff as usual. And it was really, really helpful to me. So if there's let's do a quick summary of what people can expect when they come back after the break.
Yeah.
So
we're going to talk about the course called Stress Less with Sensory Awareness. And it, like the title sounds, it's really about using your body and your senses, both internal senses and external senses, to essentially be a pathway back to presence. And that's about restabilizing. It's about recentering. It's really awareness, right? That pause that you talk about at the beginning of every one of these podcast episodes. It's a distilled form of a whole series of practices so that people can try them on in different pairs and see which one feels most skillful for their body.
Awesome. Because there's no one size fits all. We have to
Nope.
find something that works for our unique systems, but we can
Yes.
have something, can't we?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, thanks, Dr. Tia. We'll be right back with more after the break. Welcome back. I never know when the music is gonna overlap my words. Sorry, Jacob. Anyway, we're back with Dr. Tia Henderson Ho, and she is gonna walk us through now these kind of three main components of her upcoming workshop, Stress Less with Sensory Awareness. And so, Tia, I want to talk about, as we kind of prepped for the show, one of the first points that you wrote about control being an illusion. Can you take us away on that note?
Yeah, it really comes from, I guess I experienced a sensation of disgruntlement with my own process of trauma recovery in and out of therapy since I was 16. So many self-help books have gone into this brain. And one of the challenges I felt like hit was this idea that you can control your thoughts and you can control your emotions. And with generalized anxiety, for those of you listening who may have this experience, there isn't a day in my life where this brain doesn't generate really intense, anxious thoughts about something. Usually it's about relationships. This brain likes to go in loops, suspecting someone is always upset with it. And that means there will be negative consequences. It can be really detrimental to relationships, as you can imagine. And so with things like cognitive behavioral therapy, the impression that I took, which probably wasn't intentional by any of the great practitioners I've worked with, was this idea that that you can control the thoughts that your brain creates. And that led to a lot of guilt because my brain just keeps going with making new stuff up. And it felt worse and worse and worse, no matter whether it was trying, different types of trauma-focused therapies or being on anti-anxiety medication. It just felt like there was a doing it wrong because there seemed to be this hidden promise that if you do it right, you won't feel anxious anymore. And when I found the reason I used Dr. Lisa Feldman Barrett's paradigm and the new theory of constructed emotion is because when I read it, it was like everything shifted because I was like, oh, I've been meditating since I was in my early 20s, and it's very clear, like when I'm in meditation, okay, yeah, I'm not the thoughts that show up. I'm the one who hears them or listens to them or whatever that is. But it seemed like there should be I can control this. And what I learned is that no, your brain makes that stuff up. It's spitballing. It's getting bits of light and sound and smell. And then there's weird, there's all kinds of pH balances and hormone balances and hydration levels and electrolyte balances in the body. And it's taking all the stuff from inside the body and all the sensory inputs from outside the body and mapping it to past experience to create emotions and the thoughts that go with them. And what can happen is the body can also react to the thoughts the brain creates as though those thoughts are real. So like a real common metaphor used in a lot of meditation circles is this idea, you come across what looks to be a snake on the road and your body flips, right? Because it's really important for that survival mechanism to think it's a snake and believe it's a snake, but it's actually a rope or a stick, right? And so being able to start noticing all the thoughts the mind creates aren't snakes has been a really big shift for me.
Yes. And I'm just going to say yes to that. And it echoes so much of my experience around similarly. I think the part where I experienced feeling like failure if I couldn't change my thought pattern to feel better. I used to get locked, not into generalized anxiety, but in extreme frustration and anger. And I knew, I can actually remember a moment of it probably 12 or 15 years ago where I was just stuck in it for like 2 days. I was so like mad at a roommate for just not pulling their weight. And I did not know how to like deal with it in a healthy way. And it was eating at me because obviously tearing them apart was not an option.
I mean, just consequences for actions.
Right. And trying to figure out how to think another thought to feel better when my brain was doing nothing but going into a punishment zone. Like I need to punish because this is wrong. And I mean, like, hello, what does this say about anything about my early formative years?
We've all got
best
it.
of intentions. I love my parents, but we all do stuff. I'm so mindful about what am I accidentally doing to my kids. But yeah, so let's talk through like a little bit more of the strategies that you use and give us a taste of what your course is like. Either if people choose to do the workshop, which you should do, and I've linked Tia's website to the show notes so you can go find the workshop or the e-course if you need to do it on your own time. But yeah, walk us through that.
Yeah. So what this is it's basically circuit training for your senses with some added content. So I go into some of the history and I talk a little bit about the theory of constructed motion, like I was just mentioning there, and how it applies to what we're doing. And you work through a whole series of different exercises and you compare them, and they're using either internal senses or external senses. And one of the things we start with, which we can do right now, is just a really basic, I call it a body compass, but like on a scale from 0 to 10, where 0 is like you feel really bleh, and 10 is like yay. Like where do you like, just pick a number. Where do you feel right now?
6.5.
Okay, yeah. So I'm actually feeling around a 6 or a 7 myself too. And what you do is you'll try on a practice. So you check that number out, and there's a more sophisticated body compass actually is related to some of the physiological things that your brain uses to create emotions. So I go into that a little bit more deeply, but you can start with just that basic number and keep using it. So basically you'll try on, okay, how am I feeling? And then you'll try one of the practices. And one of my favorite go-tos, which I do a lot when I'm coaching folks at the beginning of every session in an arrival practice to help awareness arrive here with us instead of wherever it is in future or past thinking, is I love doing measured breathing. So I'm just going to invite us now. And if you're listening at home, you can breathe along with us. And the way measured breath works is that you're going to have a longer exhale than inhale. So I'm going to inhale to the count of 4, and I'm actually going to exhale to the count of 6. So I'm going to blow all my air out initially. And then in for 4 and exhale for 6. And I would actually do this twice. Let's do it one more time. So inhale for 4 and exhale for 6. And now I'm going to check, where am I feeling from 1 to 10? I don't actually feel much different, although what another level of body compass is actually for you to see how activated you feel 1 to 10, and then how positive to unpleasant you feel 1 to 10. So it's like 2 axes. And I noticed that my activation level nudged down to maybe a 5 right there.
Yeah, I feel really similarly, because then my activation level for being as hyper, like I was dancing before our show, I was like 7, 8, 9. I was like, it's fun to go see Tia and do the show. And I feel more at a 5, pretty chill now. And like my physical, it's funny, I'm doing it to my physical body rather than my emotional state, because my low back is a little bit sore and it's like, oh, I need to work out. I need to do the core work that I haven't done for a week, because that's what keeps my back safe. So I'm having this thought train while we're talking about having not been good enough at physical therapy.
Well, that in a nutshell gives you a feeling of what you're going to try on. So there will be a series of different practices, and we do it in a circuit. So you can take, when I do the workshop, I just do the full 90 minutes, and you'll try them on in a set of 2, and then you'll see what you notice after that, make a little note of it. And then I'll explain a little more about some of the background about each of the different practices.
This is
some of the science.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is such a helpful way to go through this. And I want to really encourage people to consider either the workshop or the e-course. And primarily because I've worked with Tia. And here's a couple things. Like, I tend to get activated super quick and hyper and happy and like bouncing around. And it's like, whoa, Ellen, settle. Like, let's absorb the learning. And when I'm in a coaching construct and I'm the one doing the work, I'm there because I do my pre-work before a session. And so I'm centered. But when I get to hang out with my friend, I'm just happy and hyper. And so it's always been fun to work with Tia, because she helps bring me in a way that there's always a moment where I'm like, I don't want to do this right now. I just want to talk to you because you're my friend. But I know that I signed up for a session with you. And so I have to like bring my session self. And going through this with Tia in this way is like a rapid form of information gathering and learning and experiencing without having to read the thousands and thousands of pages and research that Tia's done. And she's already just formulated it into a way to say, here are these dyads, here are these ways you can try out what works and what doesn't work. Because she's not going to have your answer, but she's going to walk you through the library of options so that you can find a practice that works for you. And kind of like Tia said, she's done the therapy, she's read the self-help books, and none of it worked in the exact sort of program or format, right? Because we're all unique individuals. We show up with different hydration levels every day. And they all go into creating sort of what we have to work with in the present moment. And I love that, because Finding Mindful Now, Tia's business, is all about how am I going to address what's going on in the present moment? How can I be mindful right now to help myself feel better or to get through this day? And that's what I really love, Tia, about working with you. I think we have, let's see here, a few minutes left. Is there anything that you want people to really know if they're considering signing up, or just even to work with you one-to-one? What do people need to know about how to do that?
You can go to my website. It's findingmindfulnow.com, all one word. And the take home message really is that this is about noticing what helps support your physical system. So when we do the whole circuit, one of the things about the reason I created an e-course so people can do it in a self-directed way is because if you do all of them at once, most of the time when people do that, they just feel calm at the end. And that doesn't actually help. I mean, it might be nice in the moment, but you can go to, there are so many different things you can do for that. But what I really want is for people to have a toolkit, things that they can do in the moment. And I designed these because I am a public lecturer and I will feel intense anxiety before and during lectures. So I needed things I could do in public without my students necessarily, I tell them, but without giving it away that I'm having a lot of anxiety. So that's kind of what these are. These are small, like you can do a slow breath without anybody necessarily noticing. There are different things, like when I pressed my hands, I just do this automatically sometimes. This is a type of support. It's called deep pressure stimulation. And when I do that sometimes when I'm breathing, and it's also a type of support. So I think this is just about you finding what works best for you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tia. I'm actually going to look myself, because it's always fun to walk through 90 minutes with you as a participant after knowing you as a human and to receive all the wisdom that you do. Because of course we don't get to hit on it when we're just having a random hyper happy chat.
It was a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for the honor of everybody's attention and for the great questions that you ask. I always love listening to the way that you talk about things, Ellen.
Oh, I feel the same for you. And if folks are interested, I also have another show, Inner Light with Ellen. You can find it on Apple Podcasts. And Tia was actually my first guest on there about a year ago when she was talking about that construct where we are ourselves witnessing our thoughts. The show is called We Are the Blue Sky. And you can check that conversation out as well and just go learn more about my friend, Dr. Tia. Thanks for joining us today, everybody. And thanks for coming, Tia.
Thank you for being here on The Pause. Whenever you are listening and wherever you are listening from, I hope this time gives you some space from your day to reflect and gain some insight into where you're going and how you can make your next steps count. If you're really looking to jump into your personal growth journey, schedule a free consultation with me and learn how my coaching can help you to start taking meaningful action in your life today. Visit ellenwyomingdeloy.com. See you next time.